Warning! 10 foods the elderly should not store in the refrigerator. If you're still keeping these foods in the refrigerator, you may be destroying your health without even knowing it. Some foods seem safe, but when stored in the refrigerator, they can produce toxins, cause poisoning, or even damage your internal organs. Don't let this carelessness lead to serious consequences. Check out the foods you should remove from the refrigerator before it's too late. Did you know that some foods that seem to be better stored in the refrigerator can become enemies that silently destroy your health? The refrigerator is not always the ideal place to store all foods, especially for the elderly. Improper food storage can seriously affect both the quality and nutrition of the dish, even causing unnecessary digestive problems or allergies. I understand that we all want to keep our food fresh for a long time, but did you know that improper storage can destroy their natural flavor and valuable nutritional value? Foods such as vegetables, fruits, or spices, if not stored properly, can be spoiled, reduce the amount of necessary vitamins, and even create compounds that are harmful to the body, especially for the elderly, those with weaker immune systems. The effects of spoiled or contaminated foods can be very serious. So, how can we best protect the health of ourselves and our families? Let's learn together about foods that should not be kept in the refrigerator and the deep reasons behind it. When it comes to food preservation, not everything is suitable for keeping in the refrigerator. The refrigerator, which is considered the ideal place to keep food fresh longer, is sometimes not the best choice for all types of food. For example, olive oil, one of the healthy fat sources favored by many families, if stored in the refrigerator, cannot maintain its quality as expected. Instead of protecting the oil from light and high temperatures, the refrigerator causes the olive oil to solidify, forming a waxy layer that is difficult to use, losing its characteristic flavor. In addition, olive oil is easily damaged when exposed to condensation from cold environments, which not only reduces the quality but also affects the safety of use. Therefore, to properly store olive oil, you should place the oil bottle in a cool, dark place, away from direct light and high temperatures. A dark glass bottle or stainless steel container will help protect the oil from the effects of light and preserve its wonderful flavor. Similarly, garlic, an indispensable spice in many dishes, especially for the elderly, also needs to be properly stored to keep its fresh flavor and not deteriorate. If garlic is kept in the refrigerator, it will quickly sprout, lose its flavor and become moldy. Moreover, peeled garlic will also easily spoil if not wrapped tightly. However, if you leave the garlic whole, it is best to store it in a dry, airy place, in a mesh basket or a perforated bowl to help the garlic stay fresh for a longer time. Once the garlic is peeled, you can store it in the refrigerator but need to preserve it carefully by wrapping it tightly, avoiding direct contact with the air. In addition, if you want to preserve garlic for a longer time, freezing or soaking garlic in oil is a reasonable choice, but you should only use it for a short time. I remember a patient of mine, Mrs. Elizabeth, an elderly woman in Texas, who had this problem. She always kept her olive oil in the refrigerator, but every time she took it out to use it, the oil solidified into wax and could not be used. When I explained how to properly store olive oil, she was amazed and immediately tried it. As a result, her olive oil no longer solidified and the flavor remained the same as before, making it easier for her to prepare dishes. Another time, Mr. John, an elderly patient in Chicago, shared that he always had problems with moldy garlic in the refrigerator. He was worried that the garlic would no longer retain its fresh flavor and could even affect his health. After I instructed him on how to store garlic, he felt a clear difference and felt more secure about using garlic in his daily meals. These seemingly harmless foods, if not properly preserved, will not only reduce the quality of the dish but can also cause unnecessary health problems, especially for the elderly. Therefore, understanding how to properly preserve food will not only help you keep the fresh taste but also protect the health of yourself and your loved ones. Do you remember Uncle John, the lovable American neighbor I often talk about? He lives alone after his wife passed away, but still maintains a very moderate eating habit and always takes good care of his health. In the past, he used to have the habit of storing everything in the refrigerator because he thought that it would help keep food fresh longer. However, that inadvertently caused everyday dishes to lose their nutritional value and inherent flavor. For example, honey. Every morning, Uncle John often drinks a glass of warm water mixed with honey to soothe his throat and improve digestion. but from the day he put the jar of honey in the refrigerator, he noticed that it gradually crystallized, forming tiny hard particles that were difficult to use. It turned out that cold temperatures caused the glucose in honey to crystallize faster, causing the smooth, golden liquid to become lumpy and less appealing. According to research by the American Honey Association, storing honey at temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius can increase the crystallization rate 3 times faster than at room temperature. When I told him that he just needed to keep the honey in a sealed jar, away from sunlight and high temperatures, he tried it right away, and indeed, after a while, the honey still retained its shiny color and gentle aroma as the first day. Then there was bread, a familiar food for every breakfast. Uncle John used to think that keeping bread in the refrigerator would help it last longer, but it turned out that it was counterproductive. A study by Michigan State University showed that low temperatures changed the structure of the starch in bread, making it twice as dry and hard as when stored at room temperature. As a result, the soft and fragrant loaf of bread the day before became dry and lost its delicious flavor the next day. From then on, Uncle John began to change his habits. If he wanted to eat it within a few days, he just needed to keep it at room temperature. If he wanted to preserve it for a longer time, he would cut it into slices and put it in the freezer. Every time he ate it, he just had to bake it for a few minutes and the bread would be as delicious as new. But perhaps Uncle John's biggest mistake was storing potatoes in the refrigerator, because he didn't know that potatoes at low temperatures would stimulate the process of converting starch into sugar. He accidentally made the potatoes unusually sweet. Even more dangerous, according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, when potatoes with high sugar content are fried or baked at high temperatures, they can produce acrylamide, a substance that can cause cancer. Since knowing this, Uncle John has switched to storing potatoes in a cool, dark place and away from onions to avoid absorbing moisture. From Uncle John's story, I realized that the refrigerator is not the best place to store all foods. Sometimes, a little knowledge helps us to fully preserve the nutritional value and flavor of the dish. You too, try to check again to see if any dishes in your kitchen are being stored incorrectly. Who knows, just a small change can make your daily meals much more delicious and healthier. The other day, I visited Susan, an older friend who loves gardening. She has a small garden behind her house, which is always green with fresh vegetables and fruits. She grows a lot of tomatoes and is always proud that they are sweeter and juicier than any kind bought in the supermarket. But one time, when I stopped by, she gave me a tomato and complained that even though it was freshly picked, it was bland and didn't have the characteristic aroma like before. After a while of chatting, I discovered that recently, she had changed the way she stored tomatoes. Instead of leaving them at room temperature, she started storing them in the refrigerator because she was afraid they would spoil quickly. But it turns out, according to research from the University of Florida, temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius destroy the structure of tomato cell membranes, causing them to lose their natural sweetness and significantly reduce the amount of antioxidants such as lycopene and beta-carotene. I gave her a little tip: leave the tomatoes at room temperature, away from direct sunlight, and place the stem side down to slow down the dehydration process. After trying this method for a while, Susan happily reported that her tomatoes had regained their deliciousness. As for Mark, my best friend, the story revolved around avocados. Mark is an American who loves healthy eating, always starting his morning with a slice of toast with mashed avocado. But for a while, he kept complaining that his avocados were hard and bland. Even after leaving them in the refrigerator for several days, I immediately remembered a study by the Institute of Food Technologists, IFT, which showed that when unripe avocados are kept in the refrigerator, the softening process is blocked, causing the avocados to become hard and lose their flavor. I advised him to try leaving the avocados at room temperature to ripen naturally, and only when they are soft can they be stored in the refrigerator if they want to keep them longer. Mark did, and after a week, he was beaming with joy that his breakfast was back to normal, buttery, creamy, and delicious. The story of onions came from my grandmother. She loved to cook, but one time, when she opened the refrigerator to get some onions, she found them soft and slimy in some places. That's when I told her about research from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, which showed that the humid environment in the refrigerator causes onions to absorb moisture, causing them to spoil faster. Instead, the best way is to keep onions in a cool place, in a mesh bag or open basket to allow air circulation. she was also surprised to learn that onions should not be stored near potatoes, because potatoes emit ethylene gas that can cause onions to spoil faster. As for cut onions, they can be stored in the refrigerator, but they need to be wrapped tightly to avoid spreading the smell to other foods. From that day on, my grandmother changed the way she stored them and no longer had problems with onions becoming slimy or spoiling early. Looking back at these stories, I realized that sometimes, just a small habit can affect the quality of food in our health. If you have ever encountered a similar situation, try to check again to see if you are preserving it properly. Who knows, just a small change can make your meals more delicious and nutritious. I remember once visiting Mr. George, an elderly neighbor whom I really like. He is a health-conscious person, often starting his day with a banana and a cup of green tea. But one day, he complained that the bananas he bought recently were hard and not as delicious as before, even though he carefully kept them in the refrigerator to keep them longer. I suddenly remembered a study from the University of California, showing that low temperatures slow down the natural ripening process of bananas, but at the same time, they also break down the texture and lose their sweet flavor. Furthermore, bananas stored in the refrigerator can quickly turn brown due to oxidizing enzymes, even though the inside is still edible. When I advised him to try storing the bananas at room temperature, hanging them up for better air circulation, he did so. Immediately, a week later, he happily boasted that his bananas were soft, sweet, and fragrant again. The same story happened to Laura, an old friend of mine. She loves to eat cantaloupe and watermelon, often buying whole ones to preserve them for a long time, but recently, she noticed that even freshly cut melons still taste blander than usual. This reminded me of a study from the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, which showed that uncut melons stored in the refrigerator will lose some of their important antioxidants, especially beta-carotene and lycopene. The reason is that low temperatures slow down the natural ripening process of the melon, preventing the sweetness from fully developing. The best way is to keep the melons whole at room temperature to maintain their deliciousness. Only after cutting should you store it in the refrigerator and use it within 3 to 4 days to ensure the flavor remains fresh. Looking back at these cases, I realized that not all foods should be stored in the refrigerator. Sometimes, what we think is good actually reduces the quality of the food. With just a little change in the way we store it, we can keep the natural flavor and nutrition of the food better. We often think that the refrigerator is the ideal place to store all kinds of food, but in fact, that is not always the case. Some foods lose their flavor, texture, and even nutritional value when placed in a cold environment. Habits that seem to help preserve food better sometimes cause food to spoil faster or become less delicious. With just a little adjustment in the way we store it, we can keep food fresh longer while still ensuring quality. Hopefully today's sharing will bring you useful information in taking care of your health and daily diet. If you have had a similar experience or have any other good tips on how to preserve food, do not hesitate to share in the comments section. Please follow the channel to continue updating practical nutritional knowledge. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Wish you good health and delicious meals. See you in the next content.